All right, first you're gonna need your thread and your scissors. If you look at your hank of thread, usually there's a little end hanging out. Sometimes there's not, sometimes you have to go hunting for it. But you wanna find the one that's easiest to see. The one that's tucked on the inside will probably get all tangled up as you pull it out. So, slowly, gonna pull, and if it hangs up on the other end, don't get too concerned. You just want to get a length of thread that's not too long. I usually pull twice, but if you do anything longer than that, you're going to end up having tangled up thread, and that's no fun. And you just cut it. Now, like I said, this thread that we're using has 6 strands of cotton. And if you separate the ends, you can tease them out. You can see there's 6 little pieces there. For the size of fabric we're using, which is 14 count, you want to use probably 2 or 3 strands. I usually use 3 because that gives you a really good coverage of color on your canvas, and you won't see much of the canvas coming through it. So you want to split it into 2 3-inch sections, and this is a little bit tricky, but you'll get the hang of it with practice. So this is twisted, and if you twist it with your fingers kind of like clockwise, you can see it untwist. So you're gonna untwist it just a little bit, and then put your pointer finger in between the 2 sections and drag your finger down as you're untwisting, and you'll see the end untwist as it goes. And then when you get to the bottom, you wanna hold one side with your hand and let the other one do its crazy untwisting, and then let the other one go. Because otherwise you get them all tangled together and you have to kind of do it all over again. So now we have 3 strands here. So now you're ready to thread your needle. This is usually the trickiest part for most folks who haven't sewn before. Really, it just takes a steady hand, a sharp eye, and some good lighting. So you have 3 little strands there, and if you try to just kind of poke them through the eye of the needle, sometimes you can get them through no problem. Sometimes they kind of split off. A lot of people will wet the end. Like I said, don't use your spit. You can dip it in a cup of water, or you can use your needle threader. To use your needle threader, you're going to take your needle and you're going to put the wire part of the threader into your needle, and then you have this little space here in the wire that you're going to put your thread through, and that space is much bigger than the eye of your needle. You only want to leave just a little bit, pull the thread just a little bit through, and then once you have it through the needle threader, you can pull the threader back out of the needle, which then pulls the thread through, and you can take your needle threader off. And now your needle is threaded. And we're ready to stitch. Okay, so now we have our threaded needle and we have our fabric. I'm going to show you 2 ways of getting started. Like so many creative endeavors, there are more ways to get started than just 2. And a simple Google search will give you more options than you really need to try. First is by just using a simple knot. The easiest way to do this is to loop the thread around your finger. A lot of people just roll it off their finger like that, but yeah, then you just make a little knot that's about 1/2 inch or 1 inch from the end. The main thing you want to make sure is that this knot is bigger than the hole in your canvas. So once you have your knot, you come from the back of your fabric and through one hole. And you can see that that knot is big enough that it's not pulling through. And if you look at your fabric and you look at it like there's a little square there, you came into one corner of the square and you want to go to the next diagonal corner. It doesn't matter which square you're going into or which corner, you can pick. I usually go top right to bottom left and then pull that through, and then go top left to bottom right, from the back to the front, and then again front to back. and you have one little cross. And you can see how there's little bits of the extra thread on the back here. You can trim that, or as you stitch more stitches, you can catch them in your thread in the back side. And I'll show you how to do that with the second method of starting. The other method I'm going to show you does not use knots. It's a personal preference. You can use knots if you want to, it's not a big deal. The only time that really comes into play as being a problem is if you want your finished piece to be really flat, especially if you're framing it, because usually when you frame it you have a backing on it, and if you have knots on the back it gets a little lumpy and wonky on the front. To each his own. Some people have really neat and tidy backs of their work, like Royal School of Needlework quality. Other people don't, and it doesn't matter. It's up to you. So this other method, you start the same way, minus the knot. Just pull your needle through the back of the fabric. And you want to pull it to maybe an inch towards the end. Then you pick another corner of your little square and pull it back to the back. And then when you pick your other corner that you're going to go to, you want to make sure when you pull it to the front, this little loop, that the end of your thread is caught by it. And that locks it in, so it's not going to go anywhere no matter how hard you pull, unless you break your thread. And then you just complete your stitch by crossing over what you just did. And this is my preferred method because it's just a little neater. It's one less thing to do. Now that you've completed one stitch, you just keep going. There's multiple ways you can do this. You can go stitch by stitch, and as you do that, you can just check the back of your fabric to make sure that you're catching that little extra end back there. And like I said, you can cross whichever way you want to. Doesn't matter. You just make one stitch at a time like this. Sometimes you might catch the ends and they might pull through to the front. If that happens, you can, once you've got it locked in the back, you can just go ahead and trim the excess off. I usually stitch mine under about 4 or 5 stitches, and then if there's any excess, trim it off, just to keep it a little bit neater on the back so you're not accidentally catching it and pulling it through. So there we have a line of 5 stitches. You can keep doing that and just use, one stitch at a time as you move across your fabric. You can move up and down, you can move diagonal, you can do whatever you want. It's a great thing about creative projects. The way I prefer to do it is just work in a row. So I'll do a half row, I'll do a row. Whoops, I just undid that. Don't go in the same hole you just went through. What I prefer to do is to go across a row of stitches and just do a half stitch. So you're just going to do one diagonal all the way across. So we're going to do 5 half stitches. And when we get to the end, so we've got our 5 half stitches. We're gonna just go right back and complete the X's. This is the most common way of working across a field of the same color of stitches, and it tends to give you a little bit more even tension and an even stitch. Sometimes your thread's gonna get tangled, and that's okay. The best thing to do is to just gently tug it loose. The main thing with thread and yarn is not to pull it too tight when it starts to get tangled, because then it's harder to untangle. So there we have our second row of 5 stitches. And then I'm just gonna complete a nice little square here. Using that same row method. Now, as you work, you might get to a point where you accidentally catch the end of your thread. All you have to do is gently pull it, because you only want to use 3 strands at a time. If you have that caught, then you'll be using 6. There we have a neat little block. That's a 5 by 5 stitch square. When we get to the end, we need to finish off or fasten off our thread. The easiest way to do this is to just stick your needle through the backs of your stitches and go again through 4 or 5 stitches, and you can feel it's really tight, and just pull it through. And then you snip it off. And there we go. Right, now that we have our little square, if at some point, you're gonna get in your design, you're gonna wanna change colors. Finish off your thread your needle with the new color. You can either knot it like I showed you before, or you can just pick up underneath the stitches that are already there. So instead of catching it through like the second method I showed you, you use what's already there. If you want to anchor it so it doesn't pull through, you can kind of flip around and go through one more stitch. And then wherever you're gonna start, just start stitching. So I'm gonna stitch an outline of yellow around this little blue square. And like I said, you can do 1 stitch at a time, or you can do half stitches and then come back and finish them. Just got hung up. And I have a little knot. So I'm going to really gently take my thread out of my needle, pull it to the back. And usually it's not actually knotted, usually it just gets a little twisted up. So you can kind of just gently pull on it and get it straightened up again. And if you've got like wonky, uneven ends, I usually just trim them and then thread my needle again. And pick up where I left off. And then once you're done with that particular color, you just do the same thing and thread it underneath a few stitches in the back, pull it through, and snip it off. And then you can just keep going and doing whatever pattern you want to do. Square, heart, stars, letters. It's all up to you. All right, so now that you've got the basics down, you can play around with colors and shapes, different amounts of thread, letters, all sorts of things. The world is your oyster, as they say. Congratulations! You can now take your new skill and make almost anything stitch by stitch. Using different colors of thread, you can make patterns of all kinds, from simple 8-bit-like images using just a few colors to large-scale photorealistic images. This one is just using tones of blue, but you could use hundreds of different colors. Using your imagination and a few tools, you can do almost anything you want. The next video in this series will walk you through how to create simple designs of your own, along with lots of resources for more complex designs. Now that you know how to stitch, you might be wondering where to source more materials. As I mentioned before, pretty much any nationwide craft store chain will carry the full line of DMC threads, various stitching fabrics, and all the tools you need. I highly recommend looking for a local stitching shop in your area, especially now that many small businesses are struggling. These smaller stores are often a gold mine for advice and technical sewing support, and have even more kinds of thread, including custom dyed colors to choose from. One of my favorite places to look for materials is the growing network of creative reuse stores, which are basically secondhand art supply stores. You save money while working towards sustainable making practices. Here in Boulder, we have Art Parts, and just down the road in the Santa Fe Art District in Denver is Recreative. I believe there's also a store up in Fort Collins. These stores always have lots of embroidery thread. If you're anything like me when I was a kid, you would raid your mom's stash and make friendship bracelets. But I digress. Thrift stores in general usually have a craft section that you can search as well. And you never know what else you might find to inspire your next project. As always, the internet has a wealth of information, lots of free patterns to try, and loads of stitching communities you can join. Whether you like to stitch your favorite cartoon character, your favorite gaming thing, or your typical cottage in the woods, it's all out there. Thank you so much for joining our growing community of stitchers and makers. And check out the next video in this series to learn how you can create your own patterns. Many thanks to Building 61 for collaborating in the making of this video and for being an amazing community building and resource space. Thanks to the Boulder Library Foundation for their financial support. Make sure you check out the other programs available through the Summer of Discovery, and always support your local library.